My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Well, it's December 31st, and that means 2019 is almost gone. It's almost gone. And as you probably know, there's an ancient tradition in the church to pray the Te Deum hymn, or to sing the Te Deum hymn in the very last minutes of the day, just before we enter 2020. And well, if you're still listening in the morning, you know it's a good idea to pray that hymn and give thanks to God for everything that happened in 2019. And the other day I looked up an old homily that Pope Benedict gave back in 2012, just as the year was coming to a close, and he commented on this beautiful ancient hymn from the 4th century, the Te Deum. And I wanted to read a passage from that homily in which he comments the Te Deum. It's very touching. He says, "The Te Deum we are raising to the Lord this evening at the end of the solar year is a hymn of thanksgiving that opens with praise. We praise you, O God. We acclaim you as Lord. Te Deum laudamus, Te Deum confitemur," and ends with a profession of trust. In you, Lord, we put our trust. We shall not be put to shame. In te Domine speravi, non confundar in aeternum. So however the year went, this is Pope Benedict, however the year went, whether it was easy or difficult, barren or fruitful, let us give thanks to God. Indeed, the Te Deum contains deep wisdom, that wisdom which makes us say that in spite of all, good exists in the world, and that this good is bound to win, thanks be to God, the God of Jesus Christ, who was born, died, and rose again. And at times, of course, it is hard to understand this profound reality because evil is noisier than goodness. Atrocious murder, widespread violence, grave forms of injustice hit the headlines, whereas acts of love and service, the daily effort sustained with fidelity and patience, well, they're often left in the dark, and they pass unnoticed. And for this reason, too, we cannot stop at reading the news if we wish to understand the world and life. We must be able to pause in silence, in meditation, in calm, prolonged reflection. We must know how to stop and think. In this way, our mind can find healing from the inevitable wounds of daily life. It can penetrate the events that occur in our life and in the world, and can attain that wisdom which makes it possible to see things with new eyes. So Lord, as I hear these words of Pope Benedict from several years ago now, I too want to see this year coming up now, 2020, and really with new eyes. And what does that mean, to see this new year with new eyes? How do I see with new eyes? How am I going to do this? Well, we know it is a new light that our eyes see with, and it is the eyes of a well-examined conscience. And both Pope Francis and Pope Benedict have given a lot of importance to a well-formed conscience. In fact, Pope Benedict even wrote a whole book on the Christian conscience, how it gives us access, you could say, to the truth. But there are people in whom elegance is the fruit of a carefully orchestration of themselves, of their modality, of their way of dressing, of their way of speaking, even of their way of staying quiet. But in other persons, far fewer, elegance seems to be simply the exterior manifestation of this interior clarity that they have. It's a well-balanced personality, it's refined without inner contradictions. And this doesn't mean the person doesn't have any defects or even failures, but they have elegance, they have courtesy, humility, and it's rooted in this powerful inner strength. And that inner strength is what Pope Benedict would call the conscience. And this is what allowed him to see the new year with new eyes. Now imagine, he said this commentary on the Te Deum in 2012, and only a few weeks later, he announced his resignation. Now probably when he said that, speaking about seeing the year with new eyes, he had probably already decided that he was going to resign, that this momentous decision. And he had delved deeply into his conscience. And he said that he came to the certitude that this was what God was asking of him. He came to the certitude. He delved into his conscience. He was certain of this. He was not doubting. He was not hesitant. And it's really wonderful to consider with what confidence he looked into his own well-formed conscience, humbly, and saw it with such clarity. Because for him, conscience was illuminating. It was not a blurry window where you can barely make anything out. It's a clear window where you can really look into what God is asking of you. So he obeyed. And you'll remember, how he resigned and he really felt, he said, he just did not have the strength and the spirit, both the physical and spiritual vigor needed to undertake this task. And I remember reading an article at that time by a Spanish author who described some of the qualities of Pope Benedict, and he described it as the difficult elegance of a religious leader like Benedict. And he mentioned that he had heard it said that Benedict was more at ease around books than around people. But really, it's enough to see those tumultuous, joyful crowds that came to see him at World Youth Day that you can really see that that's not quite accurate. But what it would be more accurate to say that he was more at ease listening than speaking. And I thought, when I heard that, I thought, well, now that's an apt expression, to be more at ease listening than speaking. When I read that, I thought, now there's a resolution for me for 2020, to listen more and, hold up before you speak. And imagine, that reputation that Pope Benedict had before he was elected, that he was God's Rottweiler and the Inquisitor, and yet he made interior freedom a fulcrum of his entire pontificate. And, all his doctrinal texts, they speak of love, of beauty, of truth, that these things have really a power to seduce the conscience. Truth, beauty, they seduce the conscience. And he really made the faith in that sense beautifully attractive, but also he was really capable of listening. And I remember speaking to a bishop some years ago, and he told me he was always happy to go to Rome. He had to go to these meetings in the different dicasteries in the Vatican, but he was always looking forward to seeing Cardinal Ratzinger in the CDF, in the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, because he was always so cordial and he had such a good ear. He would listen and he would really help you. And so in that case, when he resigned, he also listened to his conscience. He really heard God speaking there to him. And that's perhaps why his motto also was, in his Episcopal motto was, cooperators in the truth, cooperatores veritatis, which he adopted in 1977 when he became Archbishop of Munich. And so we know that for Pope Benedict, and also of course for us, conscience is like a window into God's world, and we must look through it daily. And maybe that traditional task of the examination of conscience to see, well, what is God asking of me? How have I responded? Because our passions can darken that window. Ignorance can place like a thick coat of smoke and making it practically impossible to see, right? To see through it. Many things will dirty that window in any house, in any year. And other things can darken it, like pride, like just mere dissipation, or fear of knowing myself, or fear of how others might judge me or think of me. All these things can lead to lack of real self-knowledge. And they say lack of self-knowledge is a powerful ally of the enemy. We say sadness is the ally of the enemy. Well, so is lack of self-knowledge. A person who doesn't really know himself will attribute to himself gifts and qualities that really belong to God, and he will seek his own glory instead of God's, attributing to himself victories that really, in reality, are really the fruit of grace. So, as we begin this new year, let us let the Word of God, the word of the light of the human race that shines in the darkness, and that it really fill our mind, fill in particular our conscience. And God will grant us that grace as we begin the new year. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.